So I'd like to welcome you all today to the Faces of Vaccine Injury Massachusetts event. You've all been through a lot. We've all honestly been through a lot. And I'm sure the path that brought you here today was not easy. But we're all coming together here today in our beautiful state capitol, the People's House, to share our stories of lives lost and shattered because of three little words: public health emergency. Health is hugely important to our daily lives. There is a well-known saying, when you don't have your health, nothing else matters. And public health departments can and do play an important role in protecting public health with laws that protect us. I'm happy that there are laws for restaurants so that you don't get poisoned when you go out to eat, or disasters. But when lockdowns happened in the spring of 2020, the first question a great many people had was, can they do this? How can they do this? Well, over the last many years, state legislatures across the country expanded the governor's powers, formerly reserved for things like natural disasters and armed conflict, and gave them, and I'm going to say this word a couple times today, broad powers to their governors during a public health emergency. No limitations, no restrictions, no expiration dates. So what we saw was 2 weeks to flatten the curve has now turned into 3 years. I'm fairly certain that the lawmakers that passed those laws expanding powers to broadly include public health didn't realize the ramifications of how those powers so broadly given could be abused in the future. And they were abused badly. Lockdown, stay home, stand 6 feet apart, masks over our breathing holes, you can't go to the gym or church or school. You can't go to neighboring states. Small businesses were devastated while big businesses remained open. And finally, to save us all, you must inject a liability-free, experimental, one-size-fits-all pharmaceutical product. And if you do, you will be rewarded with gift cards and free hamburgers and beer and access. And if you don't, you will lose your job, possibly your career, your pension, your access to an education. You will be shut out from attending sporting events or theater, no access to restaurants. You can't go to your cousin's wedding. There is an ever-growing lack of trust in public health, starting at the top with the WHO and the CDC and the FDA, and working its way down. And just to give you one example, the FDA asked the courts to hide the Pfizer COVID-19 clinical trial documents from the public for 75 years. You gotta what are they hiding? Why are they hiding information from us about these clinical trials? So we must ask ourselves why. If you attended our legislative briefing in the House Members Lounge with Dr. Madhavassetti on Tuesday, you would have learned that according to Pfizer's own documents, for every one person possibly saved from ending up in the hospital with severe COVID, 15 people had a severe adverse event, and that includes death. I looked up the VAERS reports today, 1,556,000 reports in the world, and 959,000 reports in the US of adverse events. But there was one state in the state of Minnesota where health freedom advocates recognized the dangers of the broadness of this language. In Minnesota, the governor's powers were amended to add Individuals have a fundamental right to refuse medical treatment, testing, physical or mental examination, vaccination, participation in experimental procedures and protocols, collection of specimens, and preventative treatment programs. Since the lockdown started in 2020, you probably don't know this, you won't hear it on the news, 49 states have filed over 900 right-to-refuse bills aimed at protecting bodily autonomy and stopping both the COVID shots and medical mandates. 79 of those bills have passed into law in 29 states across the nation. More than half of the states in this country have passed right-to-refuse bills in less than 3 years. So I just want you to know you're not alone. You might be alone in Massachusetts. We must make sure it does not happen again. We must not continue down this road to medical authoritarianism, where elected officials put laws in place that give them the right to tell us what we must do with our bodies, or else we can't live, work, or go to school in the state of Massachusetts. They don't. That is a basic, fundamental, God-given right protected by the Constitution. The Nuremberg Code states the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. Have we learned nothing from our past mistakes? In a few minutes, you will hear the stories of those who have been injured or harmed by the COVID-19 vaccine and its mandates. So many lives have been devastated. These stories are heavily censored. You won't hear them on mainstream media because, well, they get 75% of their ad revenue from pharmaceutical companies, and they're not allowed to talk about it. So we are here to give them a voice, and the first step is awareness, and the next step is action. I know we can have good, strong public health policies without infringing on civil liberties and a person's right to choose their own healing path. We ask you to support legislation that protects the rights of the people of Massachusetts to make their own health decisions without coercion or discrimination. I'm going to end with this quote from my own personal health freedom hero, Attorney Diane Miller. She said, well, we are a nation of laws, and I believe that we have to be involved in the lawmaking process, or we have to live with the laws that we pass. We have to be there when they're drafting laws, because that's what's shaping our reality. Looking back, we can see how very true those words are. If we, the people, don't help write the laws, someone else will do it for us. So the time is now to step up and use the legislative process to pass laws that protect health freedom rights. So with that, I want to just let everyone know about the book that we published, and then I'm going to introduce the president of Health Rights Mass just to say a few things and talk about the bills, and then we'll hear the stories from everyone that came today. We published this book. It's called The Faces of Vaccine Injury in Massachusetts. We have one for every legislative office, and if you are in the book, we have a copy for you as well. And our goal is to deliver these to every single office so they can read these stories. We collected 180 stories. We published about 80 in this book, and this is just volume 1, unfortunately. So I'm going to introduce Hannah. Speaking of the future of health freedom, Hannah is the youngest board member of Health Rights Mass. She's also the president, and who better to steward us into the future of health freedom than the next generation. So I'm going to give it to Hannah. Thank you.
Good job. Okay. Hello, everybody. As Julie mentioned, my name is Hannah King, and I am the president of Health Rights Mass. And I always feel uncomfortable when I say that I'm the youngest person, and I don't mean it to be like you guys are all old, you know, in any way. That's not what I mean. It's just I wanted to touch on that as a focal point because I am the next generation of people who come into the Statehouse and we look around and we see, wow, all these bills in the past, people before me, and it's really cool. And I am part of hopefully what will be the next fight, really, of bodily autonomy in this state. And I'm really concerned, as Julie mentioned, the last 3 years have been wild, and it's been really scary to be a young person, and I can't even imagine people that already have children and settled careers, for 20 plus years. But I'm focused on what's important to me in my future, and this is included in that. And I want people to understand that it's not just, parents, it's young people too who care about this issue. And so I also strongly believe, as I hope many others can agree, that we all have the right to choose what goes into our body, the food we eat, the medications we take, and we're all on the health journey in whatever way, whatever step of that we are. It's really important that we have the ability to choose what does and doesn't go into our body. And it's really why we're here today, to talk about in person why we need the bills that we're hoping that legislators will support. Those two bills are S 1094 and H 734, and they are both specific to bodily autonomy and then more specifically to the COVID vaccines. But I wanted to focus on the bodily autonomy bill quickly. That is really where my passion is, and again, I am really hoping that this event will give people, an idea of what we're talking about when we say people have been injured, and why these laws and these bills are so important. S 1094, it's called an act relative to bodily autonomy and family integrity. That's sponsored by Senator Patrick O'Connor. And a few things that it would do: it would prohibit mandatory medical treatments or procedures against a person's will. It also covers compulsory sharing of personal data and medical information. It prevents employers from firing you if you don't have a vaccine or you choose not to keep up with whatever they try to mandate. And also on top of that, the really important thing that this bill would do is it would give people, it would give them a way to sue over this. So there's real punitive action that goes along with this if an employer tries to fire you or anything like that. And what it doesn't do, of course, when we're talking about bodily autonomy and everybody has the right, it doesn't, of course, if you're a pilot or if I'm, working around children, I'm not going to be drunk or taking drugs, all of those testing procedures would still be in effect. This is just, broadly what happens when we have emergencies, and we can't just tell everybody that they have to take something and hope for the best, because unfortunately, the best isn't always good. And then the other bill was H 734. It's called an act prohibiting COVID-19 vaccination as a condition of entry, sponsored by Peter Durant. And this would, again, make it so that those types of things, the mandates specifically for COVID, would not affect your ability to go into a restaurant and establishment, et cetera. So those are the bills, and we are hoping today that you will see, again, why we really need these bills to be passed. And I think that's it. And who am I introducing next? Okay, and Representative Peter Durant, who I mentioned, is the sponsor of H 734. He's going to speak and say a few words for us, so thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I think it's really important that we're all here today. This is an important day for us to share those stories about the vaccine, about what's happened, and things that we can do moving forward. If you were at the event on Tuesday, or you didn't make the event on Tuesday but happened to read the short news piece about it, it wasn't in a very good light. And it's interesting because when I think about that, I think about how we have to deal with that negative publicity, which is something we shouldn't have to deal with. We have to deal with a stereotyping, if you will. And I want to bring you back. I think it was last year, Julie, When did we do the thing over at Copley? Was that 2 years ago? 21, yeah. So time flies fast when you're having fun, I guess. But an event was held over at Copley, and it was, of course, during the pandemic, and it was streamed live, and so it was done as part of a Zoom call as well. And I just remember an incident that occurred when we were there, because the people who called in, of course, some of them didn't mute, like usually happens in a Zoom meeting, right? You didn't mute your phone, or you're able to be heard. And I just remember during the presentation, somebody on the phone, and I think I know who it was, and I think it was a legislator, but somebody on the phone, you could overhear them saying, "Oh yeah, I don't know, I'm watching this Zoom meeting with a bunch of nutcases talking about the vaccine and stuff." And it struck me as that's what we're fighting against, right? Ridicule is a strong incentive or disincentive to come forward. And so that's what makes today so important. Sharing your stories, and I think I saw it over here on this board over here, it's time to talk about these, and it's okay to talk about them, right? 3 years ago when this pandemic occurred, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? And I've always in the past defended at least the start of the pandemic. We didn't know what was going on. Some scary virus was coming out of China, ironically from the same city where there was a you know what I mean, right? Thank you, virology lab. Thank you so much. I'm having a difficult time with that. Miraculously, but that lab had nothing to do with it. So, you know, nothing to see here, folks. And, you know, some of these things don't pass the sniff test, but we didn't know what we didn't know. And so some of the things that take place during those early stages, okay, we kind of have to take some drastic steps. But then we started to learn. And we started to see that, well, you know what, these things aren't necessarily working the way we thought. You know, when we would put in some archaic type of arrangements, right? You could go to a restaurant and you could sit to eat without your mask, but you couldn't stand. And you couldn't stand at a bar because somehow COVID's up here, but not down here. And just bizarre things like that take place. And if you dare question these, then you're the heretic, right? You're the nutcase. You're the person who isn't following the science. Science somehow became a religion. And Dr. Fauci, right? He first comes on and says, well, the vaccine is going to stop the coronavirus cold. That was his statement. It will stop the virus cold. And then, well, it really doesn't do that. And, well, you know, Dr. Fauci says, I am science. And so you can't question that. So I'd say that all because, again, I keep coming back to that theme. Your stories are important. Vaccine injury is real, and people need to know about it. As we get past this pandemic and as we move on, we will start to hear, and we're already hearing stories, and scientific stories about the problems with these vaccinations, that what COVID was and maybe wasn't. And we're learning more as we go along. And we have to be able to study that, find out what's true and what's not true. I mean, that's, as a legislator, that's one of our main goals, is to find out what's true and what's not true so we can make a law or not make a law that would affect all of the people in the Commonwealth or in the United States. So it's important for us to go into these things with an open mind. And so I just want to, I'm kind of starting to ramble on because that's what I do. And I just want to say thank you all for coming here today. I want to thank you for sharing your stories and keep up the good fight, because this is an important fight that we all have to win. So God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Durant. We also have here today Representative David DeCoste. He also signed on to some of our health freedom bills, so he's here to say a few words. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all that you're doing. I'm typically a guy of few words, especially when I'm preceded by such an eloquent individual as my peer Representative Durant, who basically said everything. So I would just generally say, number one, we all had concerns when the vaccine mandates went through, and particularly regarding the impact on our public safety personnel, our constituents who are nurses, and all of the parents who were concerned in retrospect now, rightly so, about the potential impact of some of these mandates. So in general, we are behind you, and I think I speak for myself and many members in both parties. We are behind you in the quest to, number one, being able, first of all, from my perspective, being able to make medical decisions for your children, particularly your minor children, and giving young men and women the ability to make decisions as to their own health care with their parents' consent, and to recognize the concerns, and again, in retrospect, very justified concerns regarding the vaccinations for COVID, and in general, vaccinations for parental types of decisions that parents will make, particularly regarding very young children. And I would also like to touch a little bit about some of the remediation of past wrongs. We have within our purview the fact that many state employees, whether they be corrections officers, public health officers, state police officers, and I'm just going off the top of my head with individuals who, some might be out there right now, that we have had to deal with it, in my estimation, were very unfairly dealt with, very poorly treated. We had nurses who, throughout COVID, were working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours work weeks. I know I'm very familiar with a close friend of mine who works in one of the Worcester area hospitals, and she was exhausted. Young nurse, under 30, and she was working 70, 80s, and I know there's some type of regulation, but whatever it was, they were allowing because of the severity of what was going on. And she made a decision because of her own background that she did not want vaccination, and they very nearly terminated her, even in spite of the fact that they had no problem with her being unvaccinated while she was working those many weeks for an extraordinary number of hours. We have, again, corrections officers, state police officers, and other employees of the Commonwealth. And my hope is that going forward, we will, number one, be able to rehire them and make good on the poor treatment, and number two, especially establish policies that if we have to deal with something like this in the future, we'll treat our employees much more fairly. So in closing, keep up the good work. Thank you for doing what you're doing here, and I look forward to working with you and your organization on very many of the bills that and the goals that you're advocating for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to get into the stories now, and the first person to tell their story, I'm not going to introduce everyone, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, so when you come up, please make sure you say your name and what town you're from in Massachusetts. So the first guest is David Russell, and David is involved in an organization called React 19, which is specifically set up to help people who have been vaccine injured, and that's how he got involved, and that's how we got connected with him. So he's going to kind of speak on behalf of a lot of the people that he knows that have been vaccine injured. So, David?
Good afternoon. My name is David Russell. I'm from Marshfield, Massachusetts. And on April 4th, 2022, my life changed. Before I had the vaccine on April 4th, I was a very healthy person, had no pre-existing conditions at all. And a year ago this month began 3 months of being bedridden. Last May, June, and July, I was completely incapacitated, could not move, and could not eat either. During that time frame, I lost 25 pounds. As I said, I became injured on April 4th, 2022, and it was my second booster or fourth Moderna shot which did me in. And obviously, based on having 4 of those vaccines, I'm not opposed to vaccines at all. I've had flu vaccine year over year, the zoster vaccine, all of them with informed consent, so I knew exactly what I was getting into. And I had studied the technology of the mRNA, and I thought, wrongly, thought it was safe. There were multiple times during this past year that I thought I was dying. In May and June last year, I could not move my body, could not move my limbs, could not eat, and I thought I was dying. And there was a couple times during that time frame that I wish I had died. Just had a hard time existing. I've been diagnosed with POTS, which is a dysautonomia type of situation where my body can't control its autonomic functions. I have peripheral neuropathy. I also have developed a heart issue, which is, they call it bigeminy heart, where I have a very erratic heartbeat. And I've developed tinnitus, which, as I'm speaking right now, my ears are ringing so loud I can barely hear myself talking. During this time frame, this last 12, 13 months, I've seen 13 different specialists, my general practitioner, and also engaged in acupuncture during this time frame. It's been terribly difficult trying to get any diagnosis, as most of the doctors either gaslit me or they had no idea what they were looking at and had no tools to diagnose what was going on other than just the standard blood tests and other things that were going on. Some of the symptoms that I started getting 10 days after that second booster, I felt like my skin was crawling off my body, complete loss of appetite, had arm and leg weakness where I could not move or lift my arms, extreme fatigue such that that caused me to be bedridden. I couldn't even get out of bed for months on end, had very bad insomnia, an anxiety level that was sky high, and I'm not the type of person that gets anxious. I was telling Bonnie on the way in, I'm probably one of the most upbeat people that I know. Glass is always 3/4 filled, let alone halfway. And between that anxiety and impending feeling of doom, I don't know if anybody's ever had that sensation before, but it is just terrible. If I had had a weapon, memory and cognitive issues, which to this day still persist. I have forgotten how to spell very simple words. When I went to write this out, I'm looking at some words that I wanted to put down, and I couldn't figure out which letters went in which order. Just couldn't figure it out. Overall malaise, body vibrations. I felt like I had a nonstop one of those magic fingers things going on. Anyway, I did my part. I got vaccinated. I feel as though I've been abandoned by the government, by the FDA, by the NIH, by the CDC. There's no acknowledgement of this condition, thus there's no therapeutic approach to it. The goals that I have, in addition to the goals that were spoken about before, is working with the React 19 organization. We're trying to get some things changed at the federal level where there's some compensation reform of the CICP and the VICP program to implement ICD-10 codes for vaccine injured such that insurance can pay for people who are going to their doctors and getting tests. Investigate the lack of follow-up that has been put in the VAERS database, because it's there for vaccine adverse effects, but they haven't used that information to take any action, and to get to full transparency of this vaccine and such that doctors have knowledge of what's going on and have some approaches on how to deal with people like myself and others that have been injured. Thank you for listening.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith, or Mary, as I go by. as in Christmas. I'm a 77-year-old Duxbury resident, retired registered nurse, and vaccine injured. I've spent a lot of time in public health, in pediatrics, and OB. It has been 2 years, 1 month, 20 days since I received my second Moderna COVID vaccine. I had a mild reaction to the first, which disappeared in 3 days, so I figured, okay, I'll go for the second, being coerced by husband and family. However, my second resulted in a severe reaction within 12 hours. I awoke at midnight, had my shot at noon, with a severe, horrifying burning throughout my whole body, from my scalp to my toes. It was a total out-of-body experience, and that's the way I described it to my husband. I felt I wanted to send him downstairs, and I said, go get me a knife. My legs need to be cut open so that it'll explode, otherwise they're gonna explode. The severity lasted 5 days. I could not walk, could not stay awake. I had severe right-sided face, jaw tingling and burning, headaches, blurred vision, brain fog, body aches, nausea, and hot flashes. All of these continue to this day. Not as often, not as intense. My previous health was excellent. I take no prescriptions. I played pickleball, golf, cared for grandkids, cared for an elderly mother, and also walked 2 to 3 miles, 3 to 6 times a week. Other than arthritis, what can I say for my age? Many of the symptoms, poisoning, remain 2 years later with the same, as I said before, although we've added occasional heart palpitations, more hot flashes, microclots in my hands, which go cold and hot. And they move all over my body. One day it'll be nausea, 3 days later it'll be my legs, 4 days later it'll be a headache and fatigue, and of course fatigue. The doctors are clueless and basically useless unless you can find somebody who listens. Nothing shows up in testing. You have to do research yourself and try to find somebody. I've read and read and read. My husband also ended up with a blood clot after his third. His hematologist at Dana-Farber finally moved over to us after many tests and said, quietly, yes, it's the vaccine, when we asked. My son passed out at Gillette Stadium with no known reason, hit the floor, cement steps on his way to the men's room, was unconscious and taken to the hospital, broke his jaw, broke his nose, stitches everywhere. I have a list of my own, 3 columns long. I am one person who knows all these people who have been affected by their vaccine. I questioned from the beginning the vaccine safety and the public health misinformation. I am not opposed to vaccines. My biggest regret is taking them. Thank you all for your courage to come forward. The devastating effects to some of you is beyond belief. Your symptoms and health, job losses, financial situations all pale in comparison to my own. I thank God I was retired. God bless you all. And thank you, Julie, Hannah, Dan, Lynn, Bonnie, and the many, many others who are keeping us moving forward. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christina Rice, and this is my daughter Lily from Dedham, Mass. We were both injured by the COVID-19 vaccine. I received both of the now original Moderna monovalent series in the first round of March of 2021. After being told the vaccines were safe and effective and the persuasion of my doctor, I got the shots at 30 and 34 weeks while pregnant with her. I immediately reported decreased fetal movement, which I was told it was fine and it was in my head. The doctor eventually, after begging them to do so, they did an ultrasound where they found that Lily had stopped growing and was diagnosed with intrauterine growth restriction. If you're familiar with that, it's usually caused by preeclampsia, cord issues, or a placental issue, which has to be diagnosed after birth. My placenta was perfectly fine once I had delivered her prematurely at 35 weeks with our emergency C-section. Where she then spent 19 days in the NICU with a CPAP for multiple days. With that was your traditional issues with being premature, where she's come over all of that. Since discharge, though, for the last 2 years, she's had issues with growth and development. She's 2 years old and the size of a 1-year-old. She is always in the constant state of ketosis, which they cannot explain at Boston Children's. Her liver has started showing signs of dysfunction, which has unexplained reasons recently. Additionally, Lily also received an autism diagnosis a month ago. We have spent the last 2 years fighting for her health, where I'm gaslit by multiple doctors, specifically at Boston Children's. All testing has been not really helpful. They can't figure out exactly what's wrong with her. We've spent multiple testing days, transfusions for IVIG. We've spent multiple stays of inpatient to get more tests done in regards to her liver. Lily recently received the diagnosis this morning that they don't know what her diagnosis is, so it's all completely unexplained. My only regret is taking a fast-tracked vaccine that they should have had many years of clinical studies, but I was told it was safe and effective, and as any mom, I did what I thought was best. Thank you for having us, and I appreciate everyone who stands up and tells their story. So thank you.
All right, and we're just going to introduce the next few speakers. We have Michael McDonald.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael McDonald. I'm from Hopedale, Massachusetts. I'm a military veteran and former state trooper, but most importantly, I'm a man of faith. I don't want to make much of a personal statement today because the last time I opened up about my faith, which I was coerced to do by the state to attempt to keep my job, I laid my heart on the table and they stomped on it. The Bible speaks clearly about the persecution for Christians standing firm in their faith in the Word of God. And I've experienced this persecution personally at the hands of the Massachusetts state government. If they can deny my faith and take away my career because of it, what's next? This is a slippery slope towards tyranny. I'm sure I don't have to remind the legislature that exercising your religious freedom is a right in the First Amendment of the Constitution, which is the very foundation for which this nation stands. Considering the government is about law and order, why has my life, my family's life, and some of the other people's lives here today been so negatively impacted for exercising these rights? The damage that has been done isn't easily articulable, and I'm sure I speak for many of us when I say until we see some resemblance of the right actions being taken by the government to personally and publicly apologize, to right their wrongdoings and be held accountable for the damage that they so eagerly and willfully created, we have lost our trust and respect in this system. Trust needs to be earned, and the government should strive to earn the people's trust and respect every day. Those feelings are gone for many of us that have been on the receiving end of this government's political actions recently. We did nothing wrong. We're men and women of faith, and the state police and governor's office told us explicitly that they have no room for our faith, and they dishonorably discharged us because of it. Even after the state and federal mandates have been rescinded, we're still here being harmed. And this Statehouse is situated on the very grounds that John Hancock once owned. He's a founding father, a patriot, and the first elected governor of Massachusetts. He's a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he's an advocate for securing individuals' rights. And these rights include freedom from tyranny, securing religious liberty, and the establishment of individual unalienable rights. one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. So why am I standing here today fighting for these very rights to be honored? Something so clearly articulated in the founding documents of this country. There's been no liberty, there's been no justice, and these actions the state have taken have reflected the betrayal of God. I fear there's willful erosion of the rights of the people by the hands of those who are supposed to represent and protect them. And there comes a point in many people's lives where they must come face to face with high-pressure decisions, where you must decide between doing what you're told to do when you know it's wrong and acquiesce out of fear, and the other in doing what you know is right, even when it's the harder choice or unpopular opinion. Your decisions as members of government will be etched in history, and it will significantly affect the lives of those you have sworn an oath to protect. What happened to our fundamental rights as Americans? I'm asking you, the ones in charge of upholding and defending it. We must ensure this never happens again. Thank you.
Good job. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello. Eat, please. It's important. My name is Sterling Smith. I'm from Arlington, Massachusetts. I'm not vaccine injured. I'm COVID policy injured. I lost my perfect job in May of 2020. I was a private chef working in Winchester for a family I loved. Got another job working in a private school. I lost that job for handing out mask information to my principal after I was offered a phys ed job, and I told them how masks are ineffective and are very bad for children when they breathe. Lost that job. But this is about my surrounding family. I don't know, I'm probably like you, where you espouse something and you've lost most of your friends. I've lost most of my friends that I've had for decades because I had an opinion contrary to theirs. I haven't gotten them back yet. I haven't gotten an apology. And I would please wish that everyone who speaks about vaccines would change the definition to what it actually is, which is an experimental gene therapy. They changed the vaccine definition just because people wanted to make themselves feel better. So please, anyone that says anything about vaccine, it's not a vaccine. It's an experimental germ therapy. Look it up. And if I knew, they knew. If you're as old as I am, there have been 10 pandemics in my lifetime, starting in 1958 and going all the way up to 1984, and all of them. Every 10 years, we know what we're doing, and we knew that. If I knew, they knew. So welcome to day number 1,152 of 2 weeks to flatten the spread. I'm going to keep counting until it's over. This is now the new normal. I'm going to keep counting. I started on the 16th of March 2020, and I'm still counting. So we're on day 1,152. Remember that, so that next year when we have this thing, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, I'll tell you what that day is too. I don't know anyone who's died of COVID who wasn't 75 or over with comorbidities and a bad immune system. But everybody I mentioned after this are personal friends of mine, every single one. What do I do now? What do I do now is many of my friends and family have been negatively affected by getting the mandated shots to continue to work or be treated for other issues. It is unfortunate that the voices of those who were coerced, intimidated, or forced were never afforded the right to speak or to refuse an experimental medical intervention that had no long-term data or side effects information on the packet insert. 3 or more shots in, these are my people. J, aged 58, healthy, in treatment for substance abuse, died of a heart attack 15 days after third shot. Bob, 57, a little overweight, not obese, dead of a stroke, brain bleed, 32 days after shot 4. K, age 61, a little heavy, dead 42 days after the shot 4. This is my sister, age 63, healthy, 1 shot, flew for 5 days. Shot 2, quarter-size hives that I have photos of on her back and neck and swallowing issues. Shot 3, pneumonia. Now has to use an inhaler. Shot 4, CVID infection, hospitalized for 3 days. Shot 5, hospitalized for 7 days. Mrs. Shea, a friend of mine, 75, after third shot, she's been bleeding since November. Doctors are baffled. Melissa, 52-year-old, healthy, had pulmonary embolisms after her 4th shot. She was in the hospital for a week. These are all my friends that have not spoken to me ever. I'm still keeping track. My niece, 8, passed out after her 2nd Pfizer shot. If the wall hadn't stopped her, she would have broken her face. Mother's baffled. Nancy, 82, healthy, has vertigo after 3 shots. Chris, 61, healthy, pneumonia, 32 days, still coughing since February. Rob, 41, healthy, heart stroke after 21 days. The list goes on and on. These are all friends of mine. My friend Joan, 3rd shot, teacher. She's been coughing since March, and we're in May now. Doctors don't know what it's for. Kira, my youngest friend, just started a new job, she's 22. Lost her baby at 5.5 weeks after her 3rd shot. The doctors are baffled. They have no idea how a healthy girl like her could have lost her baby. Jean, 78, healthy, presents persistent cough since October after her 4th shot. My name is Sterling Smith. Thank you for listening.
Hello. My name doesn't matter. I'm here to talk for other people. And I was driving to the gym one time, and on the news it said a 7-year-old girl died from COVID. So that didn't happen. There's no way that happened. So I did a public records request. I have 500,000 unredacted death certificates from Massachusetts. Every cause of death, every person, all their names, their parents' names, where they're from, medical examiner's office number, everything. So that little girl, it said on her death certificate, complications of coronavirus 19 viral infection. That's the only thing it says in part 1. But there's a VAERS record of a 7-year-old girl from Massachusetts, one of only 4. Now, the girl, Cassidy Baraka, who died from Groton, Massachusetts, she died on January 18th, 2022. The VAERS record is of a 7-year-old girl from Massachusetts injected on January 13th. The VAERS record says, first injection, injected in 5 minutes, vomited for 8 to 10 hours thereafter. So they waited, and they gave her another injection. Severe abdominal pain, 103-degree fever, didn't have a bowel movement for 3 days. She was dead in 4.5 days. It's all facts. It's sworn to under oath in federal court, District of Massachusetts. So they wrote COVID on the death certificate, but I think we know what really killed her. Brianna McCarthy was a high school teacher in Methuen, Massachusetts. She was 30 years old, and she died from a stroke. Now, the VAERS report on Brianna, and I know it's her VAERS report because I talked to the nurse who wrote the VAERS report, it said that she had gone to the ER twice. They sent her home with migraines. The 3rd time, her family brought her because she didn't recognize her sister. Then she had a seizure. She was paralyzed in half her body. The MRI showed brain lesions. She was brain dead within a couple days, and the family pulled the plug 2 weeks later. That was in 21, a year before Cassidy. Diane Dubois was 62. She died 2 weeks before Brianna was injected. She had a stroke, intracranial hemorrhage in the setting of thrombocytopenia, 11 days after vaccination. That's what it says on the death certificate. But when the death certificate goes to the CDC, they use an automatic parser. The vaccine as a cause of death did not get coded. There are ICD-10 codes, so it's not there as a cause, even though it's the root cause. I'll tell you a little bit more about Brianna in a moment. But 5 weeks after Brianna, Eden McDonald was 17 years old. This is all Massachusetts. Eden was 20 miles away from Brianna. Her date of death is June 11th. There's a VAERS report for a girl who was injected on May 23rd. She reacted almost right away with a bad headache. She went to her primary care physician twice that week, and when her headache resolved, she got her 2nd injection. She died of a cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, a hemorrhagic stroke. Her head tried to push her brain down through her neck. Horrendously painful. And the interesting thing about a CVST, cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, and that's what Eden died from at 17 years old. And Diane, 2 weeks before Brianna, from intracranial hemorrhage in the setting of thrombocytopenia, is that the brief report written by 6 doctors from Harvard Medical College, Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, it's called Fatal Post-COVID mRNA Vaccine-Associated Cerebral Ischemia. They're telling you in the title that the death of this girl was caused by the vaccine that caused the stroke. It's in the title. In fact, it's in every paragraph of that report. And one of the paragraphs states, but this isn't a CVST type of stroke, which is common. Well, they said there are several reports from these COVID-19 vaccines. So they know there are several reports of a CVST type of stroke. And that's what Eden died from 5 weeks later. And what's frequent, it says where thrombocytopenia is frequent. That's what Diane died from 2 weeks before Brianna. So the strokes that they say there are several reports and a number of reports, and it's frequent, it's 3 women in 3 months from Massachusetts who died from strokes. I don't want to leave out Amaya. She was only 12 years old. There's a friend in California who has a site, versaware.com. I told him, send me what you got from Massachusetts, because there's only so much time I have analyzing the databases. He sent me one in February 17th, the VAERS report came out of a girl who died in August. It took 6 months for the report to come out. The report is of a girl who died, excuse me, it doesn't say she died. Yes, it does. August 29th is when she died in the report. I looked it up in the death certificate database. Sure enough, the girl died, 17 years old. How do I know it's the same girl? Because both the VAERS report and the death certificate state cerebellar, tonsillar, and bilateral uncal herniation. It's the only time I've ever seen that, and I've seen thousands and thousands of death certificates. It's the same girl. She was injected on August 3rd, so in the same month. And that's more than a year. That's 15 months after the 3 women I just told you about. So that's 4 strokes in 4 women in Massachusetts. I have hundreds of these, but there's only 3 minutes. So the vaccine has killed a lot of people. In fact, from the data, I'll just close with this, and I can stand behind this, and I'll swear to it in federal court. I already have. More than 4,000 people in Massachusetts alone have died from the vaccine. If you guys know me, you know where I get that number from. Cardiac arrhythmia, cardiac arrest, pulmonary embolism, acute post-hemorrhagic anemia, thrombocytopenia, the list goes on. Thanks for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Letelier, and I come from Drake, Massachusetts. I stand here today to share with you not my own personal experience of coercion, which actually led to me being fired as a critical care nurse in December of 2022, but to share my father's story. My father was a healthy 63-year-old man whose voice was silenced once and for all on January 31st, 2022. I apologize. His name was Robert Letelier, Jr. He was given an ultimatum at his work to either get vaccinated for COVID, wear a mask at work for 10 hours a day, or lose his job. He chose to get vaccinated for COVID because he did not want to wear his mask, and he couldn't afford to lose his job. I pleaded with him to refrain from taking the vaccine, but he did what he felt he had no choice. As a nurse, I have witnessed numerous injuries and deaths directly contributed to the vaccine's administration. Working on the front lines, I watched as COVID took the human out of humanity, and this vaccine took my human from this earth. My father received his second Pfizer vaccine around July of 2022. Initially, he had no issues, but by October, he was suffering with intense generalized pain and insomnia, and his pleas for help from the medical community were disregarded and dismissed, with all his testing being negative. He had multiple ER and PCP visits with no answers. For the sake of time, his timeline of illness is as follows. On December 29, 2022, a 6-centimeter mass was found compressing his airway. This is the same imaging 2 months prior that showed nothing present. On January 6, he was back at the ER for his PET scan for immense debilitating pain as the mass was growing at an unprecedented rate per the doctors and was now compressing nerves and his airway. 2 weeks after the finding of the mass, he underwent a bronchoscopy with biopsy. On January 25th, his biopsy results came back inconclusive. No cancer was seen. When I asked the doctor to remove the mass as it was causing him immense pain and respiratory distress, I was told it was not possible. My fear of it compressing his airway is unrealistic. Well, on January 31st, he called 911 and he cardiac arrested in the ambulance en route to the hospital. And the mass did exactly what I feared, compressed his airway. On February 1st, he was due back for a repeat biopsy, but he obviously never made it. He was at the funeral home preparing for his burial. The makers of the vaccine wanted their data to be hidden from the public for 75 years. What happened to informed consent? Thankfully, people are waking up and demanding answers as their vaccinated friends and loved ones are facing injuries and death which remained unexplained. As the truth continues to come out regarding these vaccines, vindication is not rewarding but devastating to say the least. The people such as I, whom have been sounding the alarm, have been mocked, isolated, and even exiled from our communities and workplace because we remained unvaccinated. We as free people were subjected to medical tyranny, and many people in power perpetrated, I can't even say it upon us for over 2 years. Please listen to our stories and realize you and your loved ones are not immune to the harms this vaccine has caused. I thank you for the opportunity to share my father's story with you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Weissel. I'm from Pepperell, Massachusetts. I contracted COVID-19 in December 2020 while doing hospice care at Summerhill Nursing Home in Peterborough, New Hampshire. A little more. My experience was as a mild flu lasting just a few days, with only my senses of smell and taste being affected ongoingly. Upon returning to work, I was asked if I really needed the vaccine, thinking I should have natural immunity. But I was told it would only last 3 months. And I've often wondered where that source of misinformation came from. I couldn't afford to stop working, so I got my Pfizer shots in February and March 2021, foolishly trusting the safe and effective narrative. 25 days after my second dose, on April Fool's Day, I woke to excruciating pain in my mid and low back, right hip, and right leg. Contractions were turning my muscles into what felt like steel cables and were pulling my bones so severely I had searing nerve pain. Without insurance, I went to urgent care and was treated with prednisone and Flexeril, which had no effect. I then developed a host of other symptoms: chronic tinnitus 24/7, severe acid reflux, a tachybrady heart condition, hearing loss, where I quite suddenly needed closed captioning on the television, memory loss, loss of visual acuity, skin issues, very low energy. I feel like I'm aging rapidly, and I suddenly have an increase in arthritic symptoms that were prior, they were absent. My taste and smell have not normalized, and I have what I call brain throb, when it feels like there are moments of sudden pressure in my skull that are pretty scary, and they make me feel like I may suffer a stroke. I ate literal handfuls of ibuprofen and used lidocaine patches to survive work, but I had to quit within 2 months. I had no income, so my ex-wife and my son generously took me in. Eventually, I found Dr. Syed Haider online, and he prescribed ivermectin, fluvoxamine, and prednisone, which I supplemented with N-acetylcysteine and Z-Stack, and some acupuncture and chiropractic care, which had to stop due to lack of funds because I had to file for bankruptcy. Those combined treatments brought my pain under control to the point where most days I can survive without over-the-counter painkillers, though not without pain. 2 years later, I am living with this host of symptoms, still unable to work. I've been forced to start my Social Security payments 7 years earlier than planned, reducing my monthly payments, costing me dearly. So I am unable as yet to move to my own place, and I had to apply for SNAP, both humiliating after a life of working. Without the kindness of my ex-wife and the love of my son and my dog, I am uncertain I would have survived to the present.
Hi. My name is Frances Forgione, and my husband and I had been going back and forth between Colorado and Massachusetts until last summer, where we became a full-time resident in Dennis, down in the Cape. By profession, I'm a counselor, a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed addictions counselor. And I specialize in trauma, anxiety, depression, addiction, grief and loss, and couples therapy. Prior to the vaccines, I was a healthy 60-year-old working out at Orange Theory and doing all kinds of athletics and activities. In the spring of 2021, I got my Moderna vaccines in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I thought I was doing the right thing by myself and other people. My story is not the most severe that you might hear. I might look okay. I'm walking, I'm talking. That's what doctors would say to me. You must be kind of okay. But invisibly, a very painful journey. During the weeks that followed the vaccines, I started to have neurological problems ranging with a range of symptoms. Internal vibrations, buzzing, tingling, burning, my back, my spine, my arms, my legs, my feet, patches throughout my body. I felt like I was living inside an electrical storm, like you see on the horizon. I had a bizarre array of pain and symptoms throughout my body. On a good day, my clothes on my body would feel like sandpaper that burned against my body as it would move and rub throughout the day. On a bad day, it felt like acid under my skin, like shards of glass stuck in my back, and every time I would move with clothes on, it would hurt. I couldn't sleep on a bed because the sheets were painful against my body. I can't wear 90% of clothing that's out there. I found I can tolerate nylon and fleece. Fortunately, I can find a little bit with my medication that I can wear, because without medication, I couldn't tolerate anything. And that would make this a very interesting presentation. It took me on a journey for the next 2 years of over 17 doctors between Colorado and Massachusetts. Some of the best neurologists, rheumatologists, endocrinologists, and more in both states. Many had no idea what would cause this. A few were suspicious about the timing of the vaccines. I underwent a lot of different testing, a lot of blood work to rule out causes. Most of the blood work, MRIs, testing came back normal. Finally led me to an autoimmune specialist in Denver, Colorado. She was very thorough. I had a 5-hour appointment. She drew over 30 vials of blood to do a deeper dive as to what's going on. At the end of all this, her conclusions were 3 diagnoses: small fiber neuropathy with sensory issues, mast cell activation syndrome, and Sjogren's. She drew a direct link to the vaccines that had thrown off my immune system and strongly recommended no more boosters. Trial and error of medications and supplements and diet to help address the problems. As a professional counselor, I can personally and professionally attest to the emotional trauma that some of the medical issues have brought on, with a lack of places to talk openly about this topic without it becoming politicized, shut down, dismissed, ignored. Along with many others, I too have felt the confusion, the anxiety, the fear, and the aloneness. We are weary of being caught in the political crossfires and just need help. We are looking for legitimate discussions, answers, scientific research, and treatments to address the vaccine injuries, regardless of where you fall politically. The bottom line is we just need help. To this day, 2 years later, there's not a single day, not even a single moment, that I don't have some kind of symptoms I'm feeling, even though I look just fine. I am grateful to the doctors that have helped so far. I'm grateful to my family of friends who have witnessed and walked alongside this journey. And I'm grateful to God, who has allowed me to have the courage and the hope to continue this process. I want to say thank you to all of you who organized this, and thank you to all of you who shared your stories. It's really been helpful to me too. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? My name is Mary Kelly. I'm a cardiac RN at a local hospital in Boston. I apologize, I don't have an official speech typed up, but I will use my notes I just jotted down on my phone. I'm from Walpole, Massachusetts. I worked in the COVID unit in 2020. I had the first 2 doses of Pfizer in December of 2020 and January of 21. Soon after, friends and family would tease me, "Mom, you're deaf. Mary, you can't hear." I remember I had an epiphany one day at work when a coworker said, "Mary, you're deaf, you have to get that checked out." I guess nurses are the worst patients because I waited to tell my doctor. Told my doctor at my 40th annual checkup. I casually told her, "I think I'm having trouble hearing people." I did not know the exact day, so a hearing test was ordered, but crazily, it took months to get an appointment. In the meantime, I had a forced Pfizer booster to keep my job in February 22. So at this point, I still did not know my degree of hearing loss, nor made the connection to the shots. At this point, I did not want the booster and waited to the last possible day before I would get fired to get it at my local pharmacy. I even wrote to my hospital, Auk Health, that I got it against my will. Hours after the booster, I developed tinnitus, or some say tinnitus, in my same right ear. 24/7 since February of last year, every morning I hear the buzzing in my ear and I'm reminded of Pfizer. There is a Facebook group called Tinnitus and Hearing Loss After COVID Vaccine with thousands of members now. I have found numerous articles of studies about hearing loss and tinnitus after the COVID vaccine since then. Back to my timeline. A month after my booster in March, I finally had my hearing test that showed moderate to severe hearing loss in one ear, in my right ear. I have no comorbidities, and new natural hearing loss is typically bilateral, not one-sided. The moment they mentioned I needed a stat MRI to rule out a brain tumor, I jumped on the internet and researched. Upon hours, I found hundreds of comments on social media platforms saying that they too had hearing loss and tinnitus since the COVID vaccine. COVID virus can cause this as well, but that was not the case for me. Thankfully, I had an MRI within 2 weeks that showed no brain tumor that could explain this hearing loss. My doctor since then has put it in my chart as an adverse effect from the Pfizer shots. I mainly want transparency, like most of you in the room, especially since we are now offering it to 6-month-olds. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Do I need to speak louder than this level, or is this acceptable? Okay. Say it again. Okay. I have a height challenge here. Can I hold it? Is that fine? Okay. Thanks. Again, I am also having to hold the mic. I am also going to read from my phone. I hope that's acceptable. I received the first 2 doses of Moderna in January and February of 2021. I am a bedside nurse by practice, have been at the bedside for 13 years. I started having facial reactions to the hospital-provided face masks that was consistent of contact dermatitis, facial swelling, and eczema on my eyelids. I have worn face masks throughout my career for different procedures, whether in the ICU or other procedures that were going on, without a problem. This started in October of 2021, 10 months roughly after the first 2 doses of Moderna that I had received. I had not had COVID anytime during this span as well. I was prescribed 2 rounds of steroids and followed up with an allergist. The allergist was unable to find the cause of my contact dermatitis, labeling it as etiology unknown. I followed up with the occupational health department through work, who then gave me hypoallergenic face masks, and I was still having the same reactions. Now, as a nurse, I'm working 12-hour shifts, and my face is on fire by the end of this shift. Also of note, it was taking days for my face to actually calm down after working a 12-hour shift. My PCP, nor the allergist, nor the dermatologist, nor the epidemiologist from the Massachusetts Department of Health could tell me whether receiving the booster would make this condition worse or not. Working at the bedside at this time, I had concerns that if my face worsened with wearing face masks, I would be unable to perform my job, unable to provide the health benefits that I carried for my family, which consisted of my husband and 2 children. I submitted a medical exemption from my PCP to the board through the hospital that I worked for, which went through occupational health, and that then went through this board who decided who would receive an exemption and who would not. I was denied 3 times with my physician-written medical exemption. Of note, I had COVID in December of 2021, and was told that I was going to be mandated to receive the booster in March of 2022. I had COVID in December, I had positive antibodies via blood work, and I had a written exemption, as I said. I did submit that information and also told them that I did not feel comfortable receiving another booster at the time because I also had on my blood work an anti-nuclear antibody rising level, which is an indicator of an inflammation process going on. I was also informing the board that I had information from the Pfizer adverse events documentation stating contact dermatitis as an adverse event. And of note, I worked with nurses. Everyone had to have the COVID vaccine and the booster, and after receiving the boosters, majority of people were out on leave with COVID. So it was noticeable that even with the vaccines and booster, people were still contagious and still contracting the virus. We were told that being mandated to receive the booster was for patient safety. So it was unclear to me why I was being mandated to receive a booster if it was still contagious and still transmittable in front of taking care of patients. I was given a deferred period of time where I was allowed to work for 3 months without the booster, but was told I would not be receiving an exemption and I would have to get the booster by June 30th. At that time, if you had received your COVID doses, your initial COVID doses, before August of 2021, you had to have a booster by March 2022. If you received your doses initially, after August 2021, you had until June, the end of June, to receive your booster. So again, it was unclear to me why it was acceptable that I was taking care of patients during that extended time they gave me when I had received my 2 doses in January and February, and no one else was given that opportunity. And I was still gonna have a denied exemption. So sometimes the pieces just don't add up. And I ended up leaving the bedside for a while these exemptions were going on. While these non-exemptions were going on, because it was more important to me to preserve my system and whatever I had going on. And I ask that people have informed consent, and I ask that it should be an option whether someone chooses to have to put something in their body. You know what I mean, sorry. But nurses are there to take care of people. We're not there to hurt ourselves or harm ourselves. Our goal is to help everyone, including our own person. Thank you.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. So help me God. 35 years ago, almost to this day, I took an oath and became a second lieutenant in the United States Army. My father, a colonel in the Army, swore me in. It's Thanksgiving 1987. I just completed the time and monitored drive from Checkpoint Alpha to Checkpoint Bravo to Checkpoint Charlie. For those of you that don't know, that is the corridor that passed between West Germany through East Germany to West Berlin to East Berlin during the communist years of East Germany. I was stationed in Bremerhaven, Germany at the time. If you picture the Mass Pike and picture every mile a guard tower and armed officers or armed soldiers being along the Mass Pike watching you as you drive, that was the experience. They monitored the roadways and watched everything. 3 checkpoints with the distance between each one. And as an Army officer, we had to travel in uniform with rank hidden. We could not be identified. We had a specific timestamp at each checkpoint, and we had a finite time that we had to make it from Alpha to Bravo and Bravo to Charlie. If you deviated from that time, either went faster or slower, you would be detained, questioned, and possibly imprisoned. I had been in Germany for less than 10 days as a new second lieutenant. And this was my first experience of why I chose to serve in the United States Army, to honor, protect, and defend the freedoms that I was fortunate enough to be born into, that my father, grandfather, and many others fought so hard to establish and maintain. Freedom to worship my God and my Savior, Jesus Christ. Freedom to have a family with however many children I wanted. Freedom to work. Freedom to vote. Freedom to travel. Freedom to eat whatever I wanted to eat. Freedom to choose clothing. And freedom to have any medical care I needed. And freedom to receive an education if I chose that. Far too many luxuries that I didn't even know were unique because I lived in the wonderful country of the United States of America. As I approached East Germany, and I stopped at Checkpoint Charlie and explored East Berlin, communist East Berlin, it was glaringly obvious how different their world was. It was almost monochromatic. Every single car was exactly the same, slightly different in color. The clothing ranged in color very mildly. It was then that I realized why I was fighting for freedom. It was then that I realized what freedom really was. When I took that oath with my father, I thought I knew. When I stepped into East Berlin, I started to get a sense of what freedom was. And I was proud to be serving my country, helping other countries gain that freedom. I was 22 years old then. I had my life in front of me. I was eager to help others and serve our country, and proud to be part of our armed forces. And all I remembered thinking was, thank God I was born in such a great country that valued education, freedom of choice, and speech. I still think of that day. But 33 years later, in March of 2022, I got my first glimpse and understood maybe what the East Germans felt like, slightly. I understood what government coercion and control and overreach was feeling like. Because I had a son that was faced with a critical decision at 18 years old. He's here today to share with you his story. and I couldn't be prouder than to introduce my son, Nicholas Jacob Salvamini.
I was told multiple times to make sure that everybody was awake when I started speaking. So this is the best wake-up call you're going to get. My name is Nick Salvamini. I was actually 19 when that happened, I think. And I was severely affected by the COVID vaccine mandates. Let's rewind a bit. I've maintained straight A's for most of my schooling. I've routinely taken classes far above my grade level, and I've received excellent commendations from coaches and teachers alike. I've received a lot of scholarship money over the years as a result of my hard work, including full rides and almost full rides from different branches of ROTC. I scored a 1540 on the SAT on 2 separate occasions, earning an 800 on the math and a 740 on the evidence-based reading and writing. I say all this solely in the hopes that a fuller picture of my high school career will help emphasize the 180-degree turn the mandates caused. In short, I aced high school. I'm not going to take time to enumerate all the valid reasons for my unwillingness to get the COVID vaccine, as they are continuing to become more and more obvious in hindsight. Instead, I want to focus on the reality of what eventually happened. Spoiler alert, I was kicked out of the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT, and kicked out of Air Force ROTC. My entire life plan was shattered in the wake of these mandates. I thrived in my first semester at RIT. I finished the semester ranked number 1 out of 18 freshman cadets to join the AF-ROTC program. I scored incredibly high on the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test. At this point, as a result of all of my effort, accomplishments, scores, and ranking, I was all but guaranteed my choice of career in the Air Force, and I had a plan to become a fighter pilot for my country, just like my uncle had. As my second semester started, things began to change rapidly. RIT began the process of overturning my previously validated religious exemption without any new information or reason. They began sending emails explaining that I would not be allowed on campus in any way. Around 9 February 2022, I was suddenly disenrolled from RIT. I no longer had active student status, and I could not participate in ROTC. I worked with my commanding officer and the president of the school to do anything we could to make something work. No cigar. For whatever reason, however illogical, all forces from RIT insisted that I was a threat to myself and others and needed to be removed altogether. I was even told I could not attend classes remotely through Zoom. Let that sink in for a second. I was told that I could not attend classes remotely through Zoom. I continued the fight for a bit with my commanding officer close at my side, and then sometime mid-March, I left for good. My dream of being a fighter pilot for my country was erased. My point in sharing this story is to hopefully shine some light on the effects of large-scale decisions that are made quickly. This is not an easy topic. There are ramifications to hastily passing laws and enforcing mandates that have simply been passed down by a small group of experts. It is worth noting that both RIT and the Department of Defense have since reversed their COVID-19 vaccine mandates. I can say with certainty that my life was changed drastically. Everything I had worked towards was essentially blown up. To any legislators in the audience, I encourage you to please be proactive in protecting our rights. In your positions of power, your decisions have reach and effects far greater than you might know. I was forced to make an extreme choice very quickly that I do not believe is representative of the freedoms this country offers and protects and the values I was going to serve under in the United States Air Force. As more and more rights are stripped from people across the country, and more stories like mine occur, it is critical that we take proactive steps in the defense of individual freedom. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Kearns, and I'm from Wareham, Massachusetts. In December of 2019, I walked into this very state house with my then 13-year-old daughter to testify against 2 bills that would have prevented my children from attending school with the religious exemptions they've had since birth. When we left that night, I had no idea that my kids were not the only ones with a target on their back, that I was the one that needed protection. I'm an occupational therapist and have worked in healthcare for 22 years. From 2013 till I was terminated in 2021, I worked in home health for South Coast Hospital Group. At the start of the pandemic in 2020, when the first wave of patients were sent home from the hospital, we began preparations to receive sick, debilitated, and potentially contagious patients. With the PPE shortage, home health agencies were not prioritized for N95s, and we were told that we would treat patients in surgical masks. Fellow healthcare workers were outraged at being asked to put themselves at risk without being provided the minimum standard PPE required by OSHA to protect themselves from airborne viruses. I stepped up and said I would do it. The agency was able to get a small supply and asked for a dedicated team of volunteers. Of nearly 30 OTs, I was the only one to volunteer to be part of that COVID team. Many staff went so far to take a leave of absence to avoid seeing any patients at all. I volunteered because I don't discriminate against patients for their diagnosis, because my role is to provide care, and because my morals told me it was the right thing to do. What I found were scared, lonely, and sick elders barely able to care for themselves. Families were frightened to contract the virus as well, and many elders were placed in hotels or their families left food at the door. So I was more than their OT. I was a friendly person reassuring them that they had beat this virus. I was there to hold their hand, give them a hug, pray with them, or take out the trash. I helped them recover. I was told by the CEO that it was my moral obligation to take this vaccine to protect others, and that I was to set an example to the community. I was harassed and pressured by management and colleagues and abandoned by my union. I was fired on November 1st of 2021 when the agency denied my religious exemption that I had had my entire employment. I was not because they doubted my sincerity, not because it was a cost burden or a staffing issue. I was denied because my exemption, they claimed I was a risk of harm. I did fulfill my moral obligation to take care of patients in their time of need, to show up to work every day and accept the risk of infection that my coworkers refused. I set an example by holding true to my faith in God, educating myself on methods to support my immune system through natural and ethical measures, and actively making healthy lifestyle choices that has kept me from getting COVID to this day. I not only kept my patients safe, but I kept my spouse, my children, and my sister, who was battling brain cancer and lived with me from July 2020 till her passing in July of 2021. Not one of us got COVID. Not one of us got the COVID vaccine. I know I have a good sense of morals, and I will not violate my morally formed conscience nor my religious beliefs to satisfy corrupt government officials, criminal CEOs, or entitled elites in what is supposed to be a free country that honors and protects our rights in the Constitution of the United States. I am a capable, qualified, and experienced healthcare worker. I am good at what I do. I was there when I was needed. As a tax-paying American without any criminal history, I was left without the ability to provide for my family, while the same CEO of my hospital collected his $2 million salary while on administrative leave, pending charges of domestic abuse, 83 felony gun charges, only 2 weeks after myself and 200 other dedicated workers were fired. I am not sharing my story to tell you whether this vaccine is good or bad. I am sharing my story because I believe that every American has the right to choose what medical interventions they do and do not want in their body, without coercion, without duress, and without force. I am sharing my story to promote health choice, defend medical freedom, and fight discrimination and segregation that is happening in our society today. This is a medical apartheid, and it has no place in America.
Hello, friends. I treasure your stories, and you're all in my prayers. I feel so sorry for all of you. My story isn't as terrible. I had been working as a caregiver for a home health care agency for several years when the COVID crisis began. I was an essential worker and worked every day, and also worked extra shifts for coworkers who were sick or too afraid to come to work. If I shared a client with a coworker and either one of us were in contact with someone who tested positive for COVID, we were immediately quarantined for 2 weeks. This happened several times. I did not come down with COVID during any of these quarantines. Eventually, we received a salary due to the American Rescue Plan, and when that ran out, we had to use vacation time if we were quarantined. When the COVID shot rollout began, we were encouraged to take the shot and then show proof that we had taken it. Soon after, I received a letter from the agency stating that we had to take the shot. If we refused, we could still go to our clients, but we would not be receiving any new clients. The clients could ask for a caregiver who had received the shot and refuse those who had not, so our medical info was freely given in violation of HIPAA. At the end of the time limit we had been given to decide, I went to the office to decline the shot. The person from HR that I spoke with said that she was sorry to hear that and we would have to part company. She gave me 2 weeks' notice and asked me to submit a letter of resignation. I stated that I was not resigning, and she said, well, that's how we see it. I was not offered the option of remaining with my existing clients. So in the letter that I dropped off, I stated that I did not quit, I did not resign, but was forced out illegally. I asked many questions, and here are a few. What are the ingredients in these shots? What medical professional would be administering these? Has this shot been tested? And if so, on whom or what? For how long? What were the results? If I were injured from this shot, will you be compensating me for the injury? And what about the Nuremberg Code? Since these shots are experimental, I am protected by this code. I received no response from this letter. I could not collect unemployment and lived from my savings for several months before taking a part-time job in the kitchen of a Catholic school. For the past year, I have been a private duty caregiver for my former client who left the agency. That's my story, but I also wanted to just bring up the sorrow and the distress that I experienced at our church closures, the unscientific 6-foot social distancing protocol, and the futility of mask wearing. And again, I thank you for your stories.
Hello, my name is Doc Prine. I'm a resident of Warwick, Massachusetts, a very small town in western Massachusetts. And I am a journalist. I work for the largest news organization in western Massachusetts. I was told not to submit any ideas or stories, to do stories about vaccine injuries at all. I can't tell you how ashamed I am of my industry. I've started publishing on Substack under Doc's Takedown and sent a lot of columns to papers, and they were rejected for the most part. But I should tell you about my personal injuries. I received a shot because I didn't want to see my wife in a big room alone if she had a reaction. She has a brain injury, so I went in and got a shot with her. Next day, I knew I made a big mistake. 2 viral infections I have, chronic, flared up dramatically. My wife, I'm in perfect health. I really have great health. So this was a danger signal. But my wife also got 2 boosters later on. She thinks the vaccines are fine. She now has brain fog. She has a hard time thinking. Earlier this year, she began with some kind of a cold. That led to shingles. She had shingles for a few weeks, just like Dianne Feinstein, Senator for California. Then she had a cold. She couldn't get rid of it. It became bronchitis. She said to me, "I think it's my immune system." MIT senior researcher Stephanie Seneff and Peter McCullough published a paper documenting exactly how our immune systems are damaged by these shots. She spoke to me recently about going to Vermont for assisted suicide. And I said, well, we're a ways away from that, honey. And that's as much as I want to talk about that now. I want to tell you that if you go home and you want to publicize the damages that have been done to you, call up your local editor of your newspaper and say, I've been injured. I want you to do an article about me. They will say no. They're all being controlled by the federal government from the inside because they took money to say good things about the shots and minimize the damage. We are in a spiritual war, and this has been instigated by the federal government. Keep fighting, and don't let it go inside and become sadness. Try to keep it directed outward as anger and allow you to do what you can to inform the people around you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jessica Abuhijla. I live in Beverly, Massachusetts, and my story isn't a story of vaccine injury, it's a story of coercion. In 2020, I was working in a private pulmonary practice at Beverly Hospital as a clinical assistant, and that was when the pandemic happened. I was coerced constantly by the pulmonologist I was working with, who was doing only telemedicine at that time. I was one of 2 medical staff. The other staff quit. It ended up just being me. Again, it was a private practice, very small at Beverly Hospital. And I saw all the patients. He stayed home. He came in twice, once to see a senator, and the other was to convince me to wear a shot, or to wear a mask and to take the shot. I was prepared for him. I had all the studies up to that point. I have my master's in biology. I knew better. I knew what these shots were. I know what mRNA is. I know about the enzymes in our cells. I knew this was not good. Most of his coercion came over the phone, but this day he came in. He sat in the office for about 45 minutes trying to talk me into taking that shot. We discussed science. Again, I'm a scientist. He had nothing for me. He held up a Pfizer data sheet that we would give to clients or to patients that was, the 5 reasons why it's safe to take the COVID shot. It was a Pfizer-produced sheet. He never looked at a study. He never researched the technology on his own. He just went by what Pfizer told him, and that meant I need to get the shot, and everybody else did, and it didn't matter what I said. We ended up leaving that office after 45 minutes with, I guess we're not going to agree with each other. He had his arms crossed. He shook his head. I said no. And he closed the office 1 month later. He retired, and it shut down. I was unable to find a job. I couldn't find any place that would allow me to not wear a mask, allow me to not take the shot. Again, I have my master's in biology. I'm a licensed medic. I served with the Army. That's where I got my medic. And since then, I've done nothing but want to continue to serve my country and to work in medicine. I've had my career ripped away from me. I was removed from a nurse practitioner program that I worked very hard to get into. I spent really all that I had to get into that program, and they kicked me out. They wouldn't listen to me. None of the clinical sites would take religious exemptions. I don't even take Tylenol when I have a headache. I take turmeric. You would never get me to take anything experimental. I don't even take the things that have passed. But for some reason, this particular drug was enough to get rid of someone that's willing to work and has worked and proven herself for the last 15 years. So I've been working since then. So that was March 2021. I've been working with the Freedom Movement. I actually, I can't do nurse practitioner school anymore. Well, I've figured a lot out about our medical field in the last few years. My master's degree, I graduated in 2020. It was a blessing because I learned how to research. And all I've done since then is research. And I will never go to an allopathic program ever again. I will never put a dime into that. I don't want to listen to a doctor unless we've sat down and had a conversation about some basics about science. I'm now in a holistic practitioner program, and next year I will be a certified holistic health practitioner, and I plan on taking care of patients the right way, and that starts with informed consent. Thank you, and God bless.
Hi, my name is Michelle Orfanos. Before I share my experience, I would like to apologize. I'm sorry to all the vaccine injured and mandate injured. I've been a nurse for over 20 years, and the cognitive dissonance that is happening throughout this is astounding and enraging to me. I completely identify with the anger. There has been an abject failure of the medical establishment and the public health agencies to do what's right. These 3-letter agencies that I used to hold in high esteem and high regard have lost all credibility and confidence, and rightfully so. I've been told not to hope for accountability. It's the hope that kills you. Don't expect accountability. But after hearing your stories today, it's clear to me that's exactly what we need. We need to hold them accountable. So I thank you for sharing those stories. I thank you for having the bravery to come and speak out and tell your truth. Because if there's ever a time in my lifetime that the truth is needed, it's today. I was a nurse at Mass General Brigham for 12 years. During the 8 years that it was required, I applied and received a religious exemption to the flu shot. I worked through the entire pandemic. Not only did I keep the 2 jobs I had, I went to work at the Boston COVID Field Hospital. And it's still astounding and surreal to me that the health care workers that were critical and essential one day were disposable the next. In December In December 2021, my religious exemption to the COVID vaccine was denied and I was fired. I obtained my master's degree previously so I could teach nurses, so I could tell the next generation of nurses to advocate for their patients. So I was very happy, and I loved it, that a local college hired me at a local hospital to instruct the students. And this is still happening. 3 weeks in February, I was asked about my COVID status. I was then terminated from that job. We need to speak out, and that's why it's important that everybody come here. I was just thinking about, what is this gonna look like in a year or two from now? How big is this room gonna be? How many children are gonna be involved? So I'd like to stop, and the anger is not helping because I come here twice a week sometimes, and I'm with Julie and I sit across from these representatives and senators and I talk about John's story and I talk about the next speaker's story because it's important. And I look at them and I say, he was fired over a vaccine that doesn't stop infection nor transmission. He lost his pension. Blank stares. So I would like to end on a positive note because what you're doing inspires other people. Speaking out is helpful. And I really thank you for that, and I'm very grateful. And it was my pleasure to introduce one of the new friends that I've had. If any highlights from this pandemic is that I've met some amazing people and had some great friends. Phil McLean.
Thank you all for coming today and supporting freedom in Massachusetts. My name is Phil McLean, and I'm from Arlington, Massachusetts. My vaccine injury was coercion and loss of my career. I was a Massachusetts state trooper with 17 years of service when suspended without pay. I endured a 5-month discipline process, was denied unemployment, and I received a dishonorable discharge for maintaining my personal beliefs. I took the first state police test after 9/11, having felt useless watching Air Force jets fly combat patrol over Boston on that day. My job at the time was managing the site work for Genzyme's world headquarters and Vertex Pharmaceuticals manufacturing plant in Cambridge. Big Pharma was there at the beginning of my career and at the end of my state police career. In 2002, taking the test was extremely competitive. Test applicants snaked around the Bayside Expo in single file, waiting to enter the exam rooms. I was appointed to the 77th Recruit Training Troop, the first from that test. I earned the title of trooper. I remember when my senior DI had the troop stand at attention. We were holding an M14 service rifle at the balance of the piece. It's a 10-pound rifle. While we stressed, the DI taught us trooper was forever. It was a title you could only lose through shameful acts or crimes. 17 years later, as a major, that same person was signing the investigations to strip trooper from me. He thinks I'm guilty of shameful or criminal activity. He was much more charitable when I was one of the first uniformed troopers to arrive at the scene where he'd been run over by a gang member. I worked most of my career assigned to the patrol out of the Leominster Barracks in Central Mass. I worked the day shift, and my priority was to ensure safe roads for the morning commute and trying to generate voluntary compliance with the traffic laws through a visual patrol presence. I earned a reputation amongst my peers as being a worker that could be relied on and to make situations better. It's a tough job with varied situations. My coworkers appreciated when I was on scene. My supervisors valued my work ethic. They assigned me extra duties that demanded discipline and administrative skill. These tasks had to be done correctly. I was a contraband officer, responsible for cataloging evidence and ensuring chain of custody for items including clothing, alcohol, firearms, and other evidence considered necessary to make a case. My coworkers depended on me, as a failure on my part could lose them a case they may have risked in making. I was not just the barracks clerk. Patrol was my main assignment, and I performed it with the intent to serve the public. I gave disabled motorists lights when their cars broke down. I responded to accidents, usually minor in nature. I realized the vehicle owner, it was extremely important to them because it was their accident and their investment in auto now damaged. Through adherence to policy and procedure, I took trafficking away quantity of heroin out of circulation. The 3,000 or so individual sales bags resulted in at least one life saved. I took a gun from a road rager that had pointed at a family on the highway. That case extended until after my dishonorable discharge, and I had to take vacations from my new job, or as the ADA warned me, there'd be a warrant for my arrest. In my presence, the defense and prosecutor negotiated what they would call me and told me how I should describe myself because I guess dishonorably discharged trooper embarrassed them. I let them know the state does not want me to be a trooper, and retired was unacceptable as that loss has changed the future I had worked for. I patrolled in all types of weather, I answered all my calls, I performed my service without bias or discrimination. I even got to save the occasional hawk or owl that passersby were concerned about. Every day on the job, I tried to provide value to the taxpayer. Service to the taxpayer was something I believed in, and when my supervisors were trying to have me change my beliefs on the mandate, I told them I work for the people. And if I were to violate my own personal beliefs and freedoms, why would I, as a force agent of government, even care about others' rights? I just wanted all to have meant something, but none of it makes sense. I worked through most of the pandemic, celebrated as a hero for doing my job. The accommodations we worked with were acceptable, but post-mandate, they were denied. Before the mandate, I became the barracks court officer, and my main function was to coordinate activities between the barracks and the courts. My contact with the public was limited, and the courts did not have a mandate. The government's actions were arbitrary and capricious concerning implementation in an emergency circumstance. Why mandate some and not others? It didn't make sense. Keeping my beliefs, I refused a mandate that neither prevents illness nor stops disease spread. I lost a career I loved and performed delivering good service to the taxpayer. In my civil service hearing, the state's lawyers looked sheepish when asked about complaints filed against me. They had to reply that there was never one complaint filed ever against me. All my employee evaluations were either excellent or outstanding. Being a trooper was the only career my kids knew me to have. Driving my son to school after the state police suspended me, the mail carrier asked if I was taking vacation. I told him I was being fired for not being vaccinated. My son asked me not to say that because people would believe that I had lost my job for doing something racist. Even kids understand losing careers for this is unbelievable. There were unkind words spoken to them when asked where my cruiser went. I guess the state police chants family first. It was not meant for my family. So where is the sense? Medical workers dismissed from their jobs during a crisis, the current news stories that speak of shortages in all the careers subject to mandate, and refusing to acknowledge just a year ago they forced people from these professions. A month after the state police suspended me, they issued orders that the entire force to adopt accommodations. They denied those with moral objections because the vaccinated membership continued to experience illness. Those illnesses now include 2 troopers from the barracks I worked in having heart attacks, a classmate with blood clots, and a supervisor hospitalized just hours after being vaccinated. We cannot allow it to happen again that government mandates across-the-board policies that do not consider the impact of irreversible procedures. The disregard of constitutional rights, no concern for efficacy and safety. It took 40 years for the courts to overturn Korematsu versus USA and recognize the harm American citizens of Japanese ancestry stripped of their rights and property during World War II suffered. The COVID mandates are going to be marked by shame, same as that event. We must ensure this never happens again. Thank you for your support.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Johnson from Hubbardston, Massachusetts. Are there any state reps or representatives left here? Thank you. Appreciate you showing up. And I appreciate those that might have been here earlier to listen to these stories. Imagine if I was a Nazi general and I was a 45-year-old Nazi general and I killed 1,000 Jews in a camp. And then 6 months later, the war was over. Wouldn't I want to wait 75 years before that information came out? I would. I'm 45, 75 years from then, 120 years old. I'd live the rest of my life happy. No one would ever know. So I read this sign, and you wonder why they want to wait 75 years. I was a former Massachusetts trooper with 21 years of service. My job with the state police was a commercial driver's license testing. My day consisted of testing people who wanted to get their license to drive trucks and buses. We were very busy. As you know, there still is a shortage. There was a shortage then of drivers in this country. In fact, we were encouraged to work as much overtime shifts as possible so we can get more people tested. This was all going on during COVID. We accommodated the public by wearing masks, having them fill out COVID questionnaires, doing the temperature checks. When Governor Baker announced the Executive Order 595, which basically forced most state employees to get injected with experimental formula, I wasn't too concerned. After all, none of my 4 children aged 25 to 14 had been vaccinated against anything because of my religious beliefs. Every school, public and private, accepted our religious exemptions to immunizations. Even WPI informed my daughter, who was a senior at the time, that because she had a religious exemption when she started there, she would not have to get the injection like they were forcing every other student to get. But after I saw all the hoops that the state police wanted us to jump through for a religious exemption, I did start to get worried. Then on Thanksgiving Day, 2021, I received an email from the state police COVID response team stating that my religious exemption was denied, and even if they could approve it, they could not accommodate me to continue working. And then I had 3 business days to comply before being placed on suspension. There was no appeal process. However, I did ask for an appeal anyway, and reminding them that I worked for the past 20 months with accommodations. Of course, there was no response, and after 3 days, captain showed up to my house, relieved me of duty, taking my badge, my gun, and my cruiser. A few days after that, there was a duty status hearing, finding me guilty of disobeying the order, and I was placed on suspension without pay indefinitely. While suspended without pay, you're not allowed to get another job. After about 6 weeks of not getting paid, and obviously my bills not getting paid, I decided that I would buy back some military time and retire with a pension. After 23 years of service as a correctional officer and a Massachusetts State Trooper, I was forced to retire on January 7th, 2022. But I was one of the lucky ones. I got a pension. Even now, with the mandate lifted, there are troopers that are still suspended without pay, a year and a half now. Troopers that were fired, troopers that resigned. But if you join the State Police Academy right now, you don't have to be vaccinated with COVID. All those people with those years of service were fired or forced to resign, losing all of their retirement that they paid into the system. Not to mention the impact on their lives and their families. Thank you for your time.
Boy, this is a long litany. My name is Sarah Schulman, and I'm from Concord, Massachusetts. 29 years ago, I took the sacred oath that I would do no harm, and I became a physician. I took my job seriously, often sacrificing my home life for the lives that I was helping save. I missed birthdays, funerals, my kids' first steps and words. I became a specialist who saved babies' lives. I've attended 50,000 births and have saved countless lives. Because of my expertise, I was recruited by Brigham and Women's Hospital to develop a team of physicians who attended high-risk deliveries. People sought our care globally. I was at the pinnacle of my career when the pandemic struck. While at the height of COVID, I left my 3 kids and husband every day to sacrifice my life for the lives of my patients. I watched as my whole department sacrificed their lives, intimately comforting patients with COVID, while developing ways of staying healthy despite there was no vaccine for us. My experiences with health challenges and my religion had taught me that my body is a sacred temple and that it had a natural wisdom that when treated well would perform maximally. Throughout my career, I had watched how medications such as thalidomide could cause unexpected issues like birth defects. I gave drugs and vaccines to people only to find out that they were being taken off the market. I learned that only time could inform safety information. When the drugs were found to have unwanted side effects, I felt responsible for the lives I had affected. When the COVID vaccine came along, I intuitively believed that my body could keep me safe. This had been exemplified in the prior year when none of my department had gotten COVID. Because I was on the front line doing research, my research informed me that this drug would alter my genetics forever and that there was no information about the long-term effects. On October 15, 2021, my religious exemption was denied, despite 234 exemptions had been granted. I was escorted out of the hospital. I have 2 more children to put through college, and I'm unable to get a job, all because I believe in bodily sovereignty. The hospital lost one of its most seasoned, compassionate physicians. I hope these testimonials show that mandating a vaccine that has not been thoroughly studied has grave ramifications for humanity. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Ellis from Blackstone, not the shops, the actual town of Blackstone. So this is kind of a last-minute thing for me, so I don't have anything prepared. Just quick, I'll make it quick, I promise, so you don't show me the sign. So my degree is in biology, 19 years I worked in medicine, and 11 of that in clinical research. So when this shot came out, nothing made sense to me, and I said I wouldn't take it. I'm a pilot for an airline based here in Boston, and we were threatened that if we didn't take it, we'd be fired. I still said no. And I watched my colleagues, under coercion, go ahead and take it. A couple of them have passed away. A couple of them can't get their medical now to work. There's about 10% of us that stood together, held the line, and said no. We just kept saying no. A couple of us wouldn't wear masks either. So I got called from the chief pilot, told it's part of the uniform policy. But I said no. I got written up again. I got written up by a flight attendant. I got the person who I'm supposed to trust in the case of an emergency. And I got written up by customers. I still said no. A couple of months ago, we received an email. Well, sorry. Everybody's okay. You don't have to get it. And sorry for anything anything that you were going to lose your job. It's all over. Point's moot. Okay. So I was not able to eat because in a lot of the cities we go to, you need to show your papers. My family didn't have papers back during the Holocaust to show, and I refused to show mine. I don't have any. I wouldn't show any because I said no. What happened back then, everybody asks why, how did it happen? It's because people didn't stand up and say no. We need laws. I thought we had a constitution. I thought those were our laws. But I'm seeing that they don't hold up. So we need laws to change things so that this never happens again. There's an organization called the U.S. Freedom Flyers. It started as a grassroots organization that started just with pilots. And then when this became a transportation mandate, it went in, we involved Amtrak workers and a lot of the other transportation workers. It now involves everybody. They have taken to legislation. They need your help. I'm not here to pimp for them or anything. I give them money. But they are trying to get laws changed, and they're suing everybody, as far as I know, just like Children's Health Network is. I'm one of 10 pilots that's suing the CDC over their mask mandate. So there's 10 of us total across 4 airlines, I believe. And thank you. That's really all I'm gonna say. I don't want that sign to come up, but anyway, just stand up and say no. That's what we have to do, just say no, and we need laws to change this. We can never go through this again. Thank you.
Wow, that's all I can say. These stories are a lot for me right now. I hear these stories every single day of people vaccine injured. I feel blessed by God right now, blessed by my sister who's sitting over there, who told me, please do not get this shot. When I initially heard about mRNA, I thought, wow, that's different. I've never heard of vaccines made with mRNA. And blessed be to God, I started doing a little investigating, and I'm really not a big investigator. I'm a social worker for the Department of Children and Families. Well, I was a social worker. So I have 2 boys. One was in high school, one was going into college at the time, and I'm a mama bear. They're my life. So I started going down the rabbit holes, and boy, Dr. Simone Gold came up, and I listened to her lecture online, and she had a lot of concerns about the COVID vaccine. Now, who created this vaccine? Well, I started listening to Dr. Malone, and boy, he really wasn't for the vaccine for children. I started questioning everything, and I have never been vaccine hesitant. My kids have had all their shots. Quite frankly, I regret it now. But I had never had vaccine hesitancy. I trusted the CDC. I trusted the FDA. Well, as time went on, I was working from home, which was if anyone knows DCF, it's a very stressful job to begin with. You know, we're placing foster children into foster homes. That was my job. I was a recruiter. I was a top recruiter for DCF. I recruited the most foster and adoptive homes. Well, as time went on, I was working with the foster parents out of my house. I had a little bedroom. Both boys were in their own rooms doing their work. It was quite challenging. We didn't even have a computer. We had an iPad. We were all working off an iPad. Well, I'm trying to think. In January 2020, I came down with COVID. One of the boys had COVID. And I thought, please, dear God, let us make it through this. You know, I had watched the news. I had seen the freezer trucks in New York City loading up the bodies, scared the living daylights out of all of us. But I stayed strong. My kids were asthmatic. That was another concern. Disagreed with their father. Their father wanted them vaxxed. I didn't. In fact, the more knowledge I started to gain, and the more, you wouldn't see that on mainstream media. I found this on alternative media. So I started listening to Peter McCullough, and I'm like, there's no way none of us are getting this vaccine. It's not happening. Well, then I'm watching Governor Charlie Baker at the time. I think it was like June. He basically said, in so many words, I'm not playing this game. I'm not going to mandate state workers to get this vaccine. I thought, blessed be to God, because I don't want this vaccine. I don't believe in this vaccine. And everything I'm reading, it's dangerous. So then what happened is 2 months later, I'm sitting at my desk, and we get emails. All of a sudden, Charlie Baker, Governor Charlie Baker, has now mandated the vaccine. So now I'm thinking, I've got to put something in my body that I don't believe in, that I don't even know what kind of harm this is going to do. No, this isn't happening. I'm a mama bear. This isn't happening for my kids, and this isn't happening for myself. I put in a religious exemption, and that was on September 17th. Every single week, we're receiving emails from DCF, you know, the state, saying, oh, you know, in another 7 days, if you don't take your vaccine, you know, you're going to go into disciplinary measures. So now we're having meetings with the union, and I'm like, what's up with this? Like the union's supporting this vaccine mandate? They weren't even supporting us. They never even asked us how we felt about this. So days were going on, and like I said, I submitted the religious exemption on the 17th of September. It's now getting up to, it's now like October 4th, and we start going into disciplinary measures on October 15th. And I'm thinking, I've never been in disciplinary measures. I was a really stellar employee. I loved the children and the families that we served. Quite frankly, I worked my butt off for the department. I worked through COVID. I was sick. I had a slight fever. I had a migraine headache. And I worked through all of that from my bedroom at home. So what ends up happening is it comes back that they believe I hold these sincere religious beliefs, but they could not accommodate me because I was a risk and a hazard to others. I had just got through sitting with foster parents with a mask on. I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to keep my job, but not get vaccinated. And I speak on behalf of all the other state workers out there that were treated this way. So what ended up happening is October 15th came, that decision came to me on October 11th. On October 15th, the night before, my beautiful sister over there, I said, I gotta make big decisions here. I said, you know, they didn't grant the religious exemption. It's either I have to take the shot, or she begged me. My family begged me not to take the shot. It was really a stressful time. It's been a stressful time since then. I lost my job, and I had 5 more years to go before I was gonna retire. Some days I'm so angry, and some days I'm so sad. I hear these vaccine stories today, these vaccine injuries. I'm almost in tears up here. Like, this is not right. This is not America. And this is not the country I want for my kids. And all I'm gonna say is, my boys weren't vaccinated. I'm so proud of them. They stood up against this tyranny. They've had friends that have been vaccine injured now. They've seen kids with strokes, myocarditis. There was no need for this. No need at all. So my son went off to a Division II college to play ball. And I'll just tell you this brief story. And the coach called him, and he said, you know, I'm just wondering, where's your uploaded vaccine? He said, I need that uploaded. He said, you're not gonna see that. He said, I put in a religious exemption. He said, I don't think you're gonna get that. He said, Colin, what are you gonna do? He said, you know what? I don't play ball for you. That's what I'm gonna do. And at that moment, I felt like so grateful because I'm teaching my kids, you know, to stand up to this. So that's my story, but I thank all of you for being out there every single day and fighting. Thank you.
Can you hear me? I just want to thank you again, all of you. I am so inspired when I'm home and I feel alone and I feel low and I'm angry and I feel like there's nobody out there fighting. I am so inspired by all of you, and I want to thank you. So my name is Caroline, Caroline Ventola. I live on the Cape now. I have been a nurse for 37 years. I was highly regarded in my practice, and I was so respected by my peers. I worked really hard at being a really good nurse and caring for people. I worked in the pre-op area and post-op area at Mass General Brigham. In my role, it was extremely important that each patient understood the risks and benefits of the procedure they were having. If a patient did not feel comfortable, I would make sure they would get all their questions answered by their surgeon or doctor or whoever that was. They had informed consent for their surgery or their procedure. Unfortunately, this practice did not exist in 2021 when the nurses and doctors and hospital staff were mandated to get an experimental shot. No one was given an explanation of risks and benefits, informed consent, Just get the shot, one size fits all. You see, during the pandemic, in March of 2020, I was deployed to the COVID ICU units. I was asked to show up for my job. At the time, there were a lot of uncertainties about the virus and COVID and all that. Despite this, I went to work, putting my life on the line, feeling like that at the time. Minimal PPE and zero testing. I never was tested. So flash forward to spring of 2021, and we're being mandated to get an experimental shot. An experimental shot that had no impact on preventing transmission or preventing infection. Its only mechanism of action was to mitigate symptoms. And that was actually in the Pfizer insert, if you actually read it or were able to get an insert. While all my peers were getting the shot, they were out sick, 1-2 days, because of being sick from the shot. And I continued to work, never taking any days off. In October of 2021, I was terminated from my position for not getting the experimental shot, yet it was good enough, yet I was good enough and considered a hero to work through the pandemic, and then to be labeled and treated like a zero and terminated. I have since had to sell my home and relocate it. It has been a significant financial and emotional hardship, but I wouldn't change a thing. I'm here today to take a stand for medical freedom, ensuring that individuals are given the right to make medical decisions based on their own medical needs and religious beliefs, and that no institution or government will have the right to make that decision for them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to give my testimony here. My name is Jane Fagan. I'm from West Bridgewater, Mass. And I'm here to give you testimony on how myself and my daughter were personally affected by the vaccine mandate and how it sent our lives into a tailspin. We both lost our livelihoods. Just to give you my backstory, my husband had passed about a year previous to the onset of the COVID-19 virus. I will share with you that he passed from esophageal cancer. One day he woke up, he was unable to swallow, and it was a tough 2-year battle as he was already stage 4 at diagnosis. The difficulty with this type of cancer is that usually by the time the symptoms occur, the cancer has already metastasized. The prognosis is not good. So after he passed, my daughter, at that time 23 years old, and I were obviously traumatized. My husband had always been in good health. He golfed and everything, and I said, how can this be? Reality hit, and I was now the sole support of the household. I had to pull myself together and carry on. I had a good job. I had been working for a large pharmacy benefit manager, CVS Health. I was in specialty sales for 13 and a half years. And so I said, I can do this, we'll be okay. My daughter got a new job in mid-2020 at a Catholic college in Boston, so that was a good thing. She decided to get an apartment so she could be closer to work, and then COVID hit. Fast forward, she had to take all the precautions, wearing masks and so forth, and she started working remotely. I was still working in the field with my job, wearing a mask, taking precaution, as all salespeople were doing. Stricter guidelines ensued. I was working remotely, hosting virtual meetings. We were doing okay. I was able to keep things afloat and hold on to my house as a sole breadwinner. I had my financial house in order. And then in 2021, things changed. My daughter was told she needed to take the vaccine or was subject to losing her job as of August 2021. She was in a panic and she asked for a religious exemption. It was denied. She lost her job. She applied to several organizations in Boston and was unable to get a job because of the mandate. Still in her apartment, which she had gotten to be closer to her job, she was working and only to work remotely. I then had to, because she lost her job, I had to pay her rent because she was without a job. It was tight for me because I was helping her, but what else could I do as a sole parent? Just when I thought I could handle everything financially, I was told that I had to get the vaccine by November 30th of 2021, or I would be terminated from my job. Now, mind you, at that time, I think by the spring of 2022, everyone was feeling that a lot of these things were going to go away. So it wasn't until the end of November I lost my job. I asked for a religious exemption in October 2021, and I was offered an opportunity to apply for a remote job with the company. So I'm thinking I'll be okay. I pleaded. I went to the president of CVS. I wrote him a letter. I had gone to meetings and sat across from him. He was trying to convince me to take the shot. Oh, he said, my whole family took it. You should take it. So they gave me an opportunity, they said, to apply for a remote job, which I attempted to do. Then I was told a couple days later, that offer is rescinded. You can't take a remote job. You need to get the vaccine. So as of November 30th, 2021, my religious exemption was denied, and they said, this is it for you. A male colleague of mine who was younger wrote a religious exemption. He received an exemption, and they gave him a remote job. They did not give me that same consideration. So I applied for unemployment, and I was put through the paces. It took me 7 months to get it. I had to have a hearing because I was told the state said that I violated a company policy not taking the vaccine. I was in the state of panic, going through my savings, unable to retire. I desperately started to seek other employment. I was faced with the same dilemma that my daughter had. No one would hire me because I didn't have the vaccine. My daughter had to move out of state to get a job. This is a sad commentary on what happened to her, a young person. She had gone to a Catholic school, she was working for a Catholic college, and she lost her life stream, basically, because she enjoyed a job, she was happy. You know, we had just lost my husband, and it was just a horrible time for us. So anyway, I had to scramble and help her move. I had to pay for a mover and help her get back on her feet again. At this point, my funds are dwindling. It wasn't bad enough that I lost my husband. I had to lose my livelihood, too. And here I am now in my mid-60s, and I'm expected to have to start all over and get a job in my field. It is very difficult to do at this age. I am asking the legislators to take a good look at the people that have been devastated by the COVID vaccine mandate, whether it be physical injury or job loss, and do the right thing for the people. You are working for the people as a legislator. The people of Massachusetts have put you there. You are here to represent us, and we need you to stand with us and pass this law that protects all of us from being forced to take medical interventions that can potentially harm us and restore the jobs for those that lost them. I was in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, and I know the COVID vaccine did not go through the normal regulatory channels, and it should not have been mandated. Many were harmed, young and old. Medical mandates should not be part of the American way of life. We should have the freedom to choose. After all, we do live in America, a free country. Please do the right thing and do away with governmental medical mandates and restore our rights, our jobs. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I believe that was our last story, if I missed anybody. So just before you leave, a couple of quick notes. If you have a story to share, you know someone that has a story to share, if they were injured or they lost someone or they were coerced, please send them to healthrightsma.org. This is an ongoing project. The book we created was volume 1, and we will continue, and we'll try to do an online version as well. Before you leave today, our sincere hope is that when you came in, you filled out these 2 postcards, If you can go visit those 2 offices, just say hello, my name is, I'm here in the Statehouse today, I came to visit, I came for this event, this is what happened to me. A lot of times, if people are in the office, they'll just listen to you while you're there. If you want to talk to them later, you could say, hey, can we set up an appointment to talk in the future? Can I meet you in the district? I'd like to talk more about this. So just that they know that we're here. Most of them were not here today, which I have to say I'm a little disappointed, but I'm really, really thankful for the legislators that did show up. They were very much appreciated. So please go visit your office. If you want to see, where's Dan? Dan can direct you to the offices, and we have a few people that are pretty experienced, like Lynn and Sue, and if anyone can help out and escort people to offices and help introduce them, that would be amazing. And then you are free to go. I have one more thing I'd like you to hear from really briefly. Children's Health Defense New England was here today with all sorts of information, and I'm going to have Beth Ingham just come up and just give you just a quick minute or two about what Children's Health Defense New England is. It's a really important organization that we like to partner with, and they help get the message out about health freedom. So, Beth, you're up.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was just most amazing. And we as Children's Health Defense New England, myself, Beth, and Bridget.
Bridget Kearns.
And we have a group of several other women in the states of New England, and this is called the New England chapter. So please go to childrenshealthdefense.org, and you can join up. And we are honored to be invited to be a part of Health Rights Mass today. But I just want to share a little teeny piece. So in 1983, there were 7 conditions and 11 shots with about 24 doses were given to our children by the age of 15. 39 years later, there are 17 identified diseases or conditions, and our children are being given 53 shots with 76 doses of these compounds, whatever we want to call them, vaccines. And Children's Health Defense, the chairman on leave is a man named Robert Kennedy Jr., and he said that, just a moment, the phone, that the greatest crisis that America faces today is the chronic disease epidemic in America's children. 54% of U.S. youth are chronically ill. 4 in 10 kids have depression. 1 in 5 kids is obese. 1 in 6 children have developmental disorders. 1 in 10 children has ADHD, and so on. And I would like to extend this to chronically ill adults. Growing older does not mean growing sicker. What has happened to us? And we have to look at everything, not only vaccines, which are increasing in number, including this COVID experimental shot, but we have to look at our environment. And all of these are covered in great detail at Children's Health Defense. So please, if you're not a member, do join, as well as join Health Rights Mass. Thank you for your incredible witness.